Captain Mira Zelith stood at the edge of the ramp, watching the human as he disembarked. The air was thick and hot, the ground beneath them soft with the humid soil of Firaxis. It was the first time the planet had seen a human visitor, and Mira wasn't sure how to feel about it. She had spent her entire life on this dangerous world, studying its deadly terrain and mastering the art of survival. But to bring a human here? That felt like madness. Firaxis was not like any other planet in the galaxy. The Zarnians, Mira's species, had always considered it a challenge to live here. The air was dense with sulfur, and the jungles were alive, with creatures that could kill you with a single swipe of their claw. Volcanoes erupted without warning, and the storms could rip a shuttle apart. It was a world where even the bravest of soldiers hesitated to tread. Yet Mira stood on this planet, strong and proud because it was her home. She knew Firaxis better than anyone. She had learned how to navigate its jungles, how to survive its creatures, how to make fire out of nothing. This planet was her kingdom, a place she understood deeply. Her mission was clear, though. The Galactic Council, in their ever-growing desire to improve relations with humanity, had sent a human here to live among the Zarnians, to learn their ways, to witness their strength, and, as far as Mira was concerned, to probably get himself killed. The human, named Jack Carter, was a curiosity. He had been trained for off-world survival, but no amount of training could prepare him for the raw, unfiltered wilderness of Firaxis. Mira watched him take his first steps on the planet, his boots sinking slightly into the moist ground. He wasn't even looking around, seemingly unfazed by the towering trees and strange glowing plants. His clothes were strange, made of materials that looked far more suited to a sterile spaceship than a jungle. But that was Jack Carter, a mystery in himself. He had a relaxed air about him, as though he wasn't facing the danger that Mira saw, in every shadow and rustling leaf. He smiled at her, that same smile that had earned him Mira's suspicion from the moment they first met. Jack smiled too much. It made Mira uneasy, as though he wasn't truly understanding the magnitude of the situation. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Mira asked, raising an eyebrow as she observed him closely. Jack shrugged nonchalantly, his smile unwavering. "I've been camping on Jupiter's moons. Firaxis can't be worse than that." Mira's stomach tightened. Camping on Jupiter's moons? That was nothing like this. Firaxis wasn't just an uninhabited wilderness. It was alive and it was angry. The creatures here didn't just stalk their prey, they hunted it for sport, and Firaxis had no mercy. "I'm warning you," she said, her voice low. "This is no ordinary camping trip. This is a place where life doesn't care about your survival. It'll take you if you let your guard down for a second." Jack looked at her with amusement, though Mira noticed a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He clearly thought she was exaggerating. It was always the same with humans. They had a way of underestimating things, of thinking their technology and optimism could conquer anything. Mira had seen it before, with the galactic explorers who came to Firaxis and never left. They began walking through the jungle, the sound of the dense underbrush beneath their feet, the only noise for the moment. Mira kept her senses sharp, watching the trees, the sky, every movement in the distance. She knew better than to trust the calm of the jungle. It could be hiding something dangerous at any moment. Jack, however, seemed oblivious to the tension that wrapped the air like a vice. He poked at leaves, studied insects, and even squatted down to touch the soil. He didn't understand what he was up against. Mira felt a pang of irritation. Humans had a tendency to treat danger like a joke. Jack, however, was acting as if he were walking through a park back on Earth. After a few minutes, she couldn't take it anymore. "Don't touch that," she snapped, grabbing his arm just as he reached for a glowing bioluminescent plant. He looked at her, a bit surprised by her forcefulness. "Why?" "It looks cool." Mira's voice was urgent now. "It's not cool, it's dangerous. That plant will burn your skin off in seconds." Jack pulled his hand back quickly, clearly a little startled, though his smile didn't fade. I guess I'm learning the hard way. Mira couldn't help the growl that escaped her throat. He was taking everything far too lightly. If he didn't start paying attention soon, he wouldn't make it past the first night. Firaxis had a way of teaching that was brutal, unforgiving, and fast. They continued their trek deeper into the jungle, Jack still poking and prodding as Mira remained on high alert. She watched him closely, the uneasy feeling in her chest growing. This human wasn't like any soldier or explorer she had ever met. He wasn't cautious, nor did he show the usual fear that came with encountering the unknown. Instead, he seemed comfortable. Even after the warnings, the deadly creatures and the threats hidden in every corner, Jack didn't seem afraid. And that made Mira more nervous than she cared to admit. As the sun began to set, Mira set up a small camp by a black river that cut through the jungle. The water was thick and still, as if it was holding something beneath its surface. Mira set up her scanners, a habit that had saved her life more times than she could count. She looked over at Jack, who was already sitting by the fire, cooking something she couldn't identify. "That's not food," she warned. He looked at her with a mischievous grin. "I beg to differ. I just caught us dinner. Should be good, right?" Mira frowned. "Where did you catch it?" Jack pointed to the thick jungle behind them, where something large and shadowy had disappeared moments ago. Mira's eyes widened. She had recognized the creature from the shadows. It was a Gorvulak, the most feared predator on Firaxis. A monster that only the bravest dared to face. And there, on the fire, was its flesh, sizzling as if it were nothing but another meal. Jack was eating the Gorvulak. Mira's heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. The Gorvulak had been the apex predator of Firaxis for centuries. No one had ever dared to kill one. Yet Jack, this human, had done it without hesitation. And now, he was eating it. Mira's mouth went dry as she watched him. Chew. She had no words. The night on Firaxis grew eerily quiet. The sky, usually filled with the brilliant stars of distant galaxies, was now hidden by thick, roiling clouds that hung low, almost like a warning. A strange tension rippled through the air as Mira and Jack sat by the campfire. The flickering light cast long shadows, and the crackle of the fire was the only sound that seemed to penetrate the oppressive silence of the jungle around them. Mira, however, wasn't fooled by the calm. She knew the jungle well enough to understand that silence meant something else. A predator was nearby, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Gorvulak had already given her a sense of unease. But now, with the dark of night settling in, something else stirred within the dense underbrush. She had no time to feel fear. She had to remain alert, prepared for whatever might come next. Jack, on the other hand, was completely at ease. He leaned back, reclining against a log, savoring the meat from the Gorvulak that he had managed to cook. He seemed to relish it, even though Mira had warned him of its dangers. The beast's meat wasn't just tough. It was known to carry dangerous toxins, especially when consumed without proper preparation. But Jack didn't appear to care. His smile was wide as he chewed, clearly satisfied with the meal. To Mira, it was unsettling. She had seen the Gorvulak kill with terrifying speed, and now this human was treating it like any other meat, as though it had no more significance than any other animal they might have hunted. "Tell me," Mira asked, her voice low and careful. "How did you kill it?" She was trying to keep her tone neutral, but there was no hiding the edge of disbelief in her words. The Gorvulak was no ordinary predator. It was a creature feared by every species on Firaxis, even the Zarnians. The fact that Jack had killed it so easily seemed impossible. No one could just defeat such a creature. No one, except the most skilled of warriors. And even then, it was a risky endeavor. Jack didn't hesitate, his tone still light. I saw it creeping up behind me. I stabbed it right in the eye. Took a while to cook, though. He paused, chewing thoughtfully. The meat's tough, but it's not too bad once you get the hang of it. Mira's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just that he had killed the Gorvalak. It was the way he spoke about it, so casually, as though he were discussing the weather. Stabbing it in the eye? Most creatures would have torn a person to pieces before they could even raise a weapon. And yet, here Jack was, nonchalantly explaining how he had killed one of Firaxis's most terrifying predators. Her mind raced, trying to understand how this was possible. Jack had barely looked like he was trying, and the Gorvalak hadn't even put up much of a fight. As the fire crackled in the background, Mira's senses heightened. She scanned the shadows again, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. A low, guttural growl sounded in the distance, followed by the slow, deliberate thud of something heavy moving through the underbrush. Mira stiffened. That sound? She recognized it instantly. The Gorvalak's death had set off a chain reaction in the jungle. The beast may have been the apex predator, but it was far from the only dangerous creature in these wilds. Without the Gorvalak keeping them in check, other beasts would now move in, hungry and looking for new territory to claim. Mira stood quickly, her hand reaching instinctively for the weapon strapped to her side. "Stay close," she ordered Jack, her voice hardening with urgency. "Something's coming." Jack, as usual, didn't seem fazed. He looked up at her with that same strange smile, almost amused by her concern. "I thought you said you didn't like surprises. You look nervous." "This isn't a joke," Mira snapped, her eyes scanning the jungle's edge, trying to locate the source of the noise. The low growl grew louder, closer now. Something massive was on its way. Before Mira could say another word, a shape leaped from the shadows, large, dark, and moving with a speed that should have been impossible for such a creature. Mira didn't need to see more. She knew what it was. The Tirvok, a terrifying apex hunter that had stalked the lands for centuries. With 6 muscular limbs, a sleek armored body, and claws sharp enough to rip through stone, the Tirvok was a nightmare. It was more agile than the Gorvulak, and faster than any other predator on Firaxis. And now, with the Gorvulak gone, it was the undisputed ruler of this part of the jungle. Mira reacted without thinking. She pulled Jack toward the nearest tree, pushing him behind it as she took cover herself. The Turvok's massive eyes glowed a menacing red as it prowled through the jungle, sniffing the air with its elongated snout. The creature paused, its head turning slowly, as if it were aware of their presence. Mira's grip tightened on her weapon. This would be a battle to the death, and she wasn't sure if she could win. But then, something unexpected happened. Jack, still behind the tree, stood up, seemingly unafraid. Mira tried to pull him down, but he shrugged her off. He wasn't hiding. He was stepping forward. "What are you doing?" Mira hissed at him. But Jack was already moving, walking slowly, toward the Tirvok, his eyes locked on the creature's red gaze. "Stay behind the tree," Jack said casually, as if they were simply observing a zoo animal. Mira's heart raced with panic. This was madness. The Tirvok would rip him apart in an instant. But Jack didn't flinch. His eyes didn't leave the Tirvok as he took another step. Closer now, and closer still. The creature growled, its claws scraping against the earth as it began to circle, eyeing Jack as though deciding whether to attack. Mira's breath caught in her throat, her instincts screaming for Jack to retreat. But still, he didn't move. Suddenly, in one swift motion, Jack dropped to his knees and, with hands that Mira couldn't believe were steady, reached for something at his belt. He pulled out a sharp, curved knife, shiny and sleek, and in one fluid movement, lunged forward, slashing at the Tirvok's exposed flank. The beast recoiled, screeching in pain, but Jack wasn't done. With surprising strength, he grabbed the creature by the throat, twisting it in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Mira watched, stunned and horrified, as Jack made quick work of the Tirvok, a silent killer in the night. Mira's mind spun. She had never seen anything like this. She had trained for years to survive in the jungle, and yet here was a human, barely a fraction of her strength, doing the impossible. He had killed the Gorvalok, and now the Turvok, and there wasn't a single sign of fear on his face. Jack wiped the blood off his knife, turning to her with that infuriating grin still plastered on his face. "Well," he said casually, "looks like we won't be bothered for a while." The sun hung low in the sky as the morning light filtered through the thick canopy of trees above. The jungle of Firaxis, once filled with the sounds of distant predators and the hum of the unknown, now felt eerily silent. The bodies of the Gorvulak and the Turvok lay still on the ground, the once mighty creatures reduced to lifeless heaps. Mira sat on a large stone, staring at the two fallen monsters, her mind racing. The events of the previous night didn't make sense. She had seen many things in her years in the jungle: savage battles, gruesome deaths. But what had happened with Jack was beyond comprehension. A human, no more than a man, had just killed two of Firaxis's deadliest predators as if it were nothing. It wasn't possible. She had heard stories of extraordinary humans, of those with the potential for greatness, but this was something different, something unnatural. Jack, of course, was the same as ever. He had woken up early, barely bothered by the grisly scene around him. His appetite hadn't diminished either. He was hungrily tearing into the remains of the Gorvalok, the blood and gore staining his hands and face. To Mira's disgust, he seemed to enjoy it. There was something deeply unsettling about the way he devoured the meat, as if it were no more than a common meal. Mira couldn't shake the sense that there was something wrong with him, something that didn't belong. He wasn't like other humans. Not in the way he moved, or the way he spoke, or how he interacted with the world. There was a strange air of confidence about him, an aura that suggested he was far beyond the normal capabilities of any human she had ever met. And yet, he was still human, wasn't he? "Feeling hungry?" Jack's voice broke through her thoughts as he tossed a piece of Gorvalak meat in her direction. Mira didn't catch it. She didn't even bother to acknowledge the offer. She had no appetite, not after witnessing the brutality of the jungle, nor after what she had seen Jack do. Her gaze turned away from him, her mind still turning over the possibilities. "Tell me something," Mira said, her voice sharp and steady. "How did you really do it? How did you kill the Gorvulak and the Tirvok so easily? No one can fight those creatures. No one can survive their attacks, let alone defeat them. You're human, Jack. You're not supposed to be able to do this." Jack didn't seem surprised by her question. Instead, he leaned back against a tree, wiping his hands on his shirt. His gaze shifted to the jungle beyond, as if pondering the right words to say. "I'm not your average human," he said simply. "There's more to me than meets the eye." Mira's heart skipped a beat. His words were vague, cryptic, but they rang with an unsettling truth. She had suspected it for some time, but hearing him admit it so easily made her feel uneasy. She stood up, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her weapon. "What are you then?" she asked, her voice hard. She had been in this jungle long enough to know when danger was near, and right now, Jack felt like a walking, talking threat. Jack sighed and ran a hand through his messy hair. "I'm human, yes, but I've been enhanced, modified. It's not something I like to talk about." He paused, then looked at her with an intensity that made her feel uncomfortable. "I was part of a program, a military program, designed to create soldiers who could survive in hostile environments. We were trained to withstand extreme conditions, fight off the deadliest of creatures, and survive when no one else could. I was one of the successful ones." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors of such programs, humans bred for war, genetically modified to be stronger, faster, and more resilient. But she had always dismissed them as just that, rumors. Now, standing in front of Jack, the truth seemed undeniable. He wasn't just any human. He was something else entirely. And yet, he was still human enough to be dangerous. But why would they send you here? To Firaxis? This planet is practically a death sentence for anyone who doesn't belong here. The creatures here are beyond anything Earth has encountered. Jack shrugged, his expression unreadable. I was a test. They wanted to see if someone like me could survive the worst Firaxis had to offer. And maybe they wanted to see what would happen when someone like me crossed paths with the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. It's all part of the experiment. Mira's mind raced as she processed his words. She had seen humans before, but none like him. None with the strength to kill a Gorvalak with a single blow, or to stand face-to-face with a Tirvok without even flinching. His strength wasn't just physical. It was as if he could sense the creatures around him, anticipate their moves, and strike before they even had a chance to react. She had seen that kind of precision only in the most elite warriors. And yet, Jack was not a warrior. He was a modified soldier, an experiment. And now he was here on Firaxis, playing a dangerous game with creatures that most beings would never dare approach. I'm not like the others you've met, Mira, Jack said, his voice steady. I'm something more. But I'm not sure if that's a blessing or a curse. You don't know what it's like to have your entire life controlled, to be molded into something you don't recognize. But that's what I am now. And I'm here, because I need to know what's beyond this planet. I need to know if there's a place for someone like me in the universe. Mira felt a strange pang of sympathy. She had lived her life in the jungle, but she had never been a prisoner. She had always been free, with the ability to make her own choices. Jack, on the other hand, had been molded into something he didn't ask to be. His entire existence had been shaped by forces beyond his control, and now, here he was, struggling to make sense of who he was and where he belonged. Do you even know what you're doing here? Mira asked, her voice softer now. You're playing with fire, Jack. The jungle is a place of death. You may have killed the Gorvulak and the Tirvok, but you're not invincible. There are things here that will find you, no matter how powerful you think you are. Jack looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe, but I can handle it. And maybe, just maybe, I can find something here that will help me understand what I'm really meant to do. Mira felt a sense of unease settle deep in her chest. She had spent her life surviving, adapting to the dangers of Firaxis. But Jack was different. He wasn't just surviving. He was changing the game. And in a place like this, that was dangerous. She didn't know what the future held, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Jack was a force that could either save or destroy them all. And she wasn't sure which one was more likely. The jungle was quiet, the air thick with an unnatural stillness that hung over everything. Mira felt the weight of it pressing against her chest as she walked beside Jack, their steps muffled by the dense underbrush beneath their feet. Her mind was racing, still grappling with the revelations Jack had shared. It was one thing to see the strength he possessed, to witness him kill the Gorvalak and the Tirvok with ease. But it was another to understand what he had become. A soldier, no, something far more dangerous. A creature of experimentation, a tool designed for survival in the harshest of environments, yet one whose humanity had been stripped away, or perhaps twisted into something darker. There were questions now, questions she hadn't wanted to ask, but couldn't ignore. What else had they done to him? How far did their experiments go? And what did he truly want from this jungle, this planet that was as hostile as it was beautiful? Her thoughts were interrupted when the distant howl of a Firaxian predator echoed through the trees, a sound so chilling it could freeze the blood in one's veins. Mira tensed instinctively, her hand drifting to the hilt of her weapon, even though she knew it would be of little use. She had seen Jack's ability to fight, seen it with her own eyes. But that didn't mean she trusted him. Not yet. He had no idea how dangerous the true predators of this planet were. those who hunted in packs, those who could track their prey across miles of terrain without breaking a sweat. The Phyraxian predators were not like the Gorvolok or the Tirvok. They were smarter. They hunted for sport. And they were relentless. Jack didn't seem concerned. He continued walking, his posture relaxed, his gaze fixed ahead, as though nothing could touch him. It was maddening the way he carried himself, as though the entire jungle, Phyraxis itself, was beneath him. His confidence, his unnerving calm, only served to heighten the unease Mira felt. The strange part, though, was that she wasn't the only one feeling it. Something was shifting in the air, something was watching them, something more than the usual jungle predators. Mira had been on enough dangerous missions to know when something was wrong, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming at her. There was something in the trees, something watching them. She took a slow step back, her eyes scanning the dark shadows between the branches, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever had caused that unnatural silence. Then, without warning, it happened. The ground shook beneath their feet, a low rumble that started distant but quickly grew louder. Mira's heart skipped a beat as she whipped her head to the side, her eyes wide with panic. Jack, however, didn't flinch. His expression didn't even change. Mira could feel the ground vibrating through her boots now. The air was thick with tension, and then it hit her. The sound of the trees being ripped apart, the screeching of something enormous, something far too large to be anything she had ever seen on this planet. "Get down!" Mira shouted, her voice urgent, but Jack didn't respond. He simply stood there, waiting, as though the oncoming threat wasn't a threat at all. Before Mira could react, a massive shadow erupted from the trees. The creature that emerged was something out of her worst nightmares, a towering, serpentine monster, its scales glinting darkly in the filtered light. Its eyes were pitch black, voids that seemed to swallow the surrounding air. Its maw was filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth that could tear through metal with ease. The creature's body slithered over the ground, each coil stretching for tens of feet. Its movements were terrifyingly fast, and its hiss echoed through the jungle like a death knell. Mira had faced many predators in her life, but this was something else. The Phyraxian serpent, as they called it, was one of the most feared creatures on the planet. It hunted alone, and it had been known to take down entire teams of experienced hunters. The tales told of its power, its terrifying speed, and its near-impossible resistance to damage. It was a force of nature, and it was bearing down on them now. But Jack, instead of running or even preparing for a fight, took a single step forward, his eyes locked on the monstrous serpent. The creature hissed again, its massive body coiling, ready to strike. Mira's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't going to end well. She knew it. Then, with an almost casual movement, Jack reached into his jacket, pulling out a long, gleaming knife that caught the faint light of the jungle. Mira's stomach twisted as he effortlessly spun it in his hand, the blade almost dancing in the air. Was he insane? That thing would swallow him whole in seconds. The serpent lunged. In an instant, it was upon them, its vast body crashing down like a massive wave, its jaws snapping with a speed that would have shattered any normal person's bones. But Jack moved faster than Mira could even comprehend. With one swift, calculated movement, he leapt forward, the knife slicing through the air with deadly precision. He struck the serpent just behind its head, driving the blade deep into its scales. The creature screamed, a sound so loud it shook the very ground beneath them. Mira's heart was in her throat as she watched, unable to comprehend what was happening. Jack didn't hesitate. He wrenched the knife free and struck again, and again, each blow landing with horrifying accuracy. The serpent twisted and writhed, trying to throw him off, but Jack was relentless. He was faster than anything she had ever seen, moving with an unnatural grace, his strikes coming faster than her eyes could follow. The creature's cries grew weaker, its movements slowing as the blade carved through its flesh, cutting deep into its body. Finally, with a final, anguished screech, the Phyraxian serpent collapsed, its massive body hitting the ground with a deafening thud. Mira stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. Jack stood over the fallen beast, breathing heavily, his knife still in his hand, his body covered in the serpent's blood. His expression was calm, as if he had just completed a simple task, nothing more. "Is that how you survive, Jack?" Mira asked, her voice barely above, a whisper. She had thought she understood him, thought she knew what he was. But now, seeing him standing there, victorious over a creature that had terrorized the planet for centuries, she realized how little she truly understood. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he wiped the blood from his face, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost contemplative. "I survive because I have no other choice. The world may have turned its back on me, but I'll keep going, and I'll keep fighting." He looked at her then, a flicker of something, deeper in his eyes. "You want to know what I am? I'm not a man. I'm not a monster. I'm something in between. Something that was never meant to exist." Mira stared at him, a strange mixture of fear and understanding washing over her. She had asked herself countless times what Jack really was. Now she had her answer. But it wasn't enough. There was more to this story, more to his past, and somehow she knew it wasn't over yet. They had crossed a line, and what awaited them beyond that line was something neither of them could have ever predicted.